Right guys, so today we're doing an LS400 1UZ non-VVTi. This is from a 1989 to 1991/92, and it's going into an IS200 and it is plug and play. So let's get into it. Right, so as discussed, this is going to be a 1989 to 1991/92 LS400 1UZ non-VVTi. It's going into an IS200, and in this case the customer is using a J160 Manual Gearbox. It is completely plug and play, so we'll go through all of that in a minute. But first what we're going to do is we're going to go through the build process so you can see what it looks like underneath all of that heat shrink over there, what we do when we build these harnesses. So let's do that now and we'll come back in a second. Right, so now you see exactly what it looks like over there. What we're going to do today is, first thing we're going to do is going to go through the entire layout, explain all the sub harnesses that need to be connected, and then what we'll do is we'll move into the testing section, and that's going to involve two sections as well, one with just the ignition on and one with the engine actually running. So to start off with, as I said, the layout is what we're going to go through, and we're going to start right here at the ECU box. So as I said, it is completely plug and play, so you can see it interfaces with the standard two plugs that come in your IS200. You then have your 4 ECU plugs over here, and they are again keyed all differently, so you can't plug them in the wrong place. Obviously we have our MPX device, obviously to convert signals for the dash, so they all work as well. And then down underneath here you've got your 3 body plugs, which is a blue, a grey and a black one over there. So they just again plug straight in. They are keyed differently, so you can't plug them in the wrong place either. Right, so moving along from there, we then get to the grommet, and that grommet goes down into there, and it just fits straight in over there. Once we come out the grommet, we then, first thing we're going to break out to is going to be our igniters. Okay, so obviously in this case the customer is far away, so we're using our igniters to test it. But yeah, normally we get you guys to send us the stuff so we can test your products with your harness to make sure everything works. But that's the first breakout section over there. We've made it so you guys can mount the igniters on the strut over here. Again, these need to be earthed, so you can see we've got this bolted directly down to the actual strut over there, so the igniters are getting a good earth through there. What's going to happen then is the harness is going to run through over there, and obviously your end is going to be lower. This would be plugged in there, this would be making its way up and coming up to the engine there. It's then going to split over here on top of the cam cover, and what we're going to do first of all is go down this way, and then we're going to make our way around that way over there. So moving along over here, it's going to split over here when it goes to the cam sensor on the left bank over there. So remember, there are 2 cam sensors, one underneath there. We'll go through that in a minute. But it splits off to the cam sensor. Then it makes its way around over here, and you can see there's a little clip or a metal frame usually over here. And you can see I've cable tied the harness over there to keep it out of the way. Then it's going to move down to here, and you can see another breakout point over there where my finger is right there. It's going to break out to go to your coil on the left bank over here. It's also going to break out to go down to your oil pressure switch, which is just over there, where you can see my hand is over there. It's also going to break out and it's going to go down to your Lambda sensor. So you can see I'm wiggling it there, so you can see the plug just over there. And again, so what we do is we bring these down here so it can run along there, stay away from the heat of the exhaust. Standard harness usually runs down the back between the exhaust and the block. Obviously that means putting heat shields and all that type of stuff in. So we do this to keep it nice and simple and out of the way of the heat. Now also it's going to break out, and underneath here you can see there's a hole just there where my hand is over there. So a wire comes through, down through there, and goes straight to your crank sensor. Now obviously, as you can see, every single plug is labeled. So that is ignition or IGNL for ignition left bank over there. This is CRK for crank over there. So when you come to fit it, everything should be really, really straightforward. Just a case of matching up the names with where it goes. And you can use this video just to show you exactly how everything is routed. Okay, there is one other one which we just have to go through over here, and that is just over here, and that is your aircon pump. Okay, right, so the MPX device allows us to get the AC request signal from inside the vehicle, and obviously that's what we use then to control the aircon pump. You just need to plug it into your aircon pump. That's basically all you need to do, and that will work as prescribed, or basically whenever you press the aircon inside the vehicle itself. Right, so that's that section over there. Let's move over and go around this section over here. Now this is quite boring, this section, because there's actually nothing coming out here. It just goes straight down over here. You obviously have a mounting point there. You could P-clamp it onto there if you want. You can clamp it down to here using these mounting holes. If you can see down there, there's a screw hole there, there's a screw hole there. You could obviously fasten it down to there as well. What we're going to do is come back to the back over here, and this is where the actual first breakout of this section is over here. Now there is quite a lot going on here, so we're going to go through it one by one. So first of all, we've got our ground cable. So that bolts into an M8 bolt that goes inside there. You'll notice you do have another bolt hole down here, and I think you do actually have another bolt hole over there. This is the only earth for the harness, so that's the only one you've got to bolt down there. What you can do is you can actually take an earth from here to the firewall if you want to. It's a common standard Toyota procedure, so again, nothing wrong with doing that. And they do like earth, so if you can, just put one in there. Little sort of ground strap. If you've seen those like earth straps where they're not even sheathed, they're just like a flat braid, is perfectly fine there as well. Next up, we've got our gearbox sub harness. So again, what we've done is we've moved these to a sub harness. Obviously, you guys sometimes like to change your gearbox. So if you do ever change your gearbox, you can just phone us up and we can make you whatever gearbox harness is relevant to your particular setup. Okay. And just while I'm here, a little tip as well. If you guys are running an IS200 with a manual, they did get their speed from the gearbox. It comes into here, makes its way over to the cluster over there. Conveniently, if you guys are swapping to BMW gearboxes or CD009s, anything that doesn't have a speed sensor in the gearbox, it's really not a major issue. There's an ABS and TRC ECU inside the car that we can actually get a speed signal from for the cluster, so you don't have to worry about it. So if you guys are switching over to BMW gearboxes, what we'd normally do is just provide you with a reverse switch from here, and then provide you with a wire that you can then plug into your ABS ECU and run up to the back of the cluster. And we have written down instructions with photographs on how to do that. So if you ever need to do that, it's not a problem at all. We've got everything for you covered. Next up is our sub harness. So that's the one that goes under the intake. And that one is including the 2 knock sensors and the starter. Just going to cut to a picture now to show you what that looks like underneath there. Okay. Now, as you'll see here, we've actually wired twin core shielded cables for both the knock sensors. So if you guys ever do upgrade to aftermarket ECUs, we can quite happily supply you with a harness that allows you to run Bosch wideband knock sensors, and all the wiring is already in those plugs over there. So again, not a major issue to do that. Next up is kind of like a join/split harness, if you want to call it that. We've got a 6-pin DTM plug here. That is for the idle speed control valve. Okay, so that's the valve that's on the front of the engine over there, and you can see it plugged in over there. And next up, we've got a 12-pin connector, and that is for all of your injectors. I'm just going to cut through some pictures now to show you exactly what it looks like underneath there. So as you can see, it just runs straight down the middle, pops out either side for the injectors, and then runs directly along and goes over to the idle speed control valve. All right. Okay, so as you can see, all of the injectors here, they are not part of this harness over here. They are part of that sub harness that goes over there. And obviously they are all labeled, so you can just pop them in. So you've got injector 1, 3, 5, and 7. So you can see injector 5 labeled over there. So remember, this is the left bank, and the way they number the cylinders is 1, 3, 5, and 7. That's the right bank. Again, you're always looking from the driver's position. And that's going to be 2, 4, 6, and 8 over there. Again, so that's how you're going to work out all the labels. You obviously saw in the pictures over there, the way the harness works as well. If you actually mix them up, the harness is going to look a little bit weird, and you're going to have a bunching up of one particular section. So that should help you guys get that right as well. Okay, so I think that's everything on this side over here. We've got injectors and idle speed control, sub, gearbox, and earth. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to move over to the other side and carry on our way around there. Alrighty, so the harness runs along here over here. You can see you've got mounting points there, and if you can see where my finger is, there's another bolt hole there, so you can actually P-clip the harness over on that side over there. You could probably even run it around the fuel rail if you wanted to, but this will just make it easier to remove, because the whole idea behind this section is that you can remove the intake manifold without having to remove the engine harness. That's kind of the idea. Only thing you'd have to unplug is your TPS sensor over there, because that would obviously come along with the intake. So again, we've got all our injectors over there. That's on a separate harness over there, so no worries about that. There's one breakout underneath the throttle, and that then comes to the TPS plug, which you can see over there. Okay. Moving along, we got another breakout at the front here, which I'm hoping you guys can see, but it's just over there, basically where my finger is there. Now we're breaking out, we're going to go into our gauge temperature. So that is for the actual gauge in your car. Underneath here, which hopefully you can see the gray plug, there's your coolant temp sensor. There's a 2-wire sensor over there. The other sections that you can see running underneath here are actually going to your coil, and that plugs in there where my finger is. You can actually see the plug there with a clip. And then lastly, your cam sensor, which again mounts onto the mounting for the coil over there. So that's that whole section over there. I do apologize, it's very difficult to see because obviously it's underneath. So when you are fitting it up, you'd probably want to loosen this up a bit so you can move this out the way. But it does kind of have to be on, because you've got to plug in your coil and you've got to plug in your cam sensor as well. Now moving along from there, it's going to run down to here, and roughly there where your airbox is, or this sort of section over here, we then have the breakout which runs over to the mass airflow sensor. So you'll see the early models, so 1989 to about 1994, they use these big aluminium housings. They're a completely different MAF from the later models one. These are not a hot wire one. So obviously they're not interchangeable between the later models and the earlier models. So you do need to have these. Obviously this is one of the points of contention for a lot of guys going standalone. These have been discontinued by Toyota. Even if they weren't, they were a ridiculous like £1,000 or something like that. So they are available online, but all you're basically going to get is Chinese copies these days, unfortunately. So that's why I say bone of contention. Sometimes if you guys getting engines without the MAFs and without the igniters, sometimes it's actually worthwhile just going with a standalone, just for the cost of trying to find all of these bits and bobs to make it all work. But on a plus note, you can take everything from a 95 to 97 LS400 and run it on this engine. That is absolutely no problem at all. This engine is actually a 97, so again, I can demonstrate clearly that you can take a 91 LS400 and run it on one of these, and vice versa. So if you guys are ever stuck and you've got an early engine but it didn't come with a harness or whatever, by all means, finding the later stuff from the 95 to 97 is very easy, and it is a route to go down. So you do kind of have the two options. You can either get all the later stuff and fit it, or you can go the route of a standalone ECU. Right, so carrying on with the harness though, it's going to pop down over here and it's going to break out down here around about the power steering pump. Then we're going to go down and we're going to have the sub harness for the alternator. So again, we've done this because some of the earlier engines had the big round pin plug. And then obviously the later ones from I think about 92 onwards had the oval plug that you can see over there. All right, but also remember you can run not only these ones. This is actually a 3UZ alternator on here. You can actually run the later ones from the sort of American and European LS430, GS430. Those are the ones that came with the 4-pin square ones, but you'll see 1 pin's not actually utilized. So it's the same connections in there. The only one you can't use is from a Crown, because that actually has ECU controlled alternator. So that won't work, unfortunately. But very rare to come across those unless you import a lot of engines. So for you guys in Europe and America, you should be able to pick up these from a scrapyard, even if it's a later generation one. You can phone us up. We can do another harness with a square 4-pin plug and just plug straight in and away you go. The last one that's going to be over here is moving down again to our Lambda sensor over there. So again, this is designed to pop down in here, run along the block over there, and then plug into the Lambda sensor over there. Now, if you guys are wondering, you can see I've got brand new Lambda sensors in there. These are actually Denso part numbers, which are quite a lot cheaper than Toyota. And at the bottom of every video, I usually put a list of all the part numbers for you guys, and I do include the Denso ones for that. We do have part numbers for timing belts, tensioners, coolant temp sensors, gauge temp sensors. Those will all be down in the bottom of the description. So if you guys are looking for part numbers, either to cross-reference from your local supplier or to buy directly from Toyota, those should all be down there for you as well. Okay, right, so that is the complete layout. What else is required from you guys? Well, there's basically 2 or 3 things. Number one is you've got your main power cable from your alternator. So that bolts on over there. You can see mine's just running down over there. Again, this is just a temporary setup for my test bench. But basically what you'd want to do is have your cable, run it along there. Usually just run it along the subframe There you go, behind the sump over there. And what you want to do is you want to run it along there and pop it up to over here. Now this is the actual alternator mounting point for the 12 volts, and that is fused by 120 amp fuse. So that actually protects the cable in the event of anything going wrong, which is exceptionally useful, especially in these cases, because you're running the cable down close to an exhaust. If it was to melt and short out, that fuse would blow and you wouldn't have a fire on your hands. Okay, so that's quite important to do that. Well, I feel it's quite important to do that. Obviously, some guys don't. I'm going to leave it in your capable hands, but if you guys want to, please do put it on there. Also, remember, when you guys are busy, there's a cable that pops out the bottom over here. You can see it in my hand there. That also goes to the main power on your battery as well, all right? This is obviously a right-hand drive vehicle. The same applies for a left-hand drive vehicle. It's just that all of this is on that side instead of this side. So you left-hand drive guys are quite lucky. Your alternator has a nice short cable going directly from the alternator to the fuse box over there. Us right-hand drive guys, we have to run it along the subframe. All right, so that is the alternator power. The next up is the actual starter motor power. So you'll see I've got this thick cable popping out there. That's just going to go straight to the positive of your battery. It doesn't go anywhere else. And obviously you normally get that with your harness. Most of the time it never comes off because you have to actually take the intake manifold off to get it off. If you do have an LS400, these are incredibly long. So you do want to cut them down, re-terminate them with a new terminal to go straight onto the battery, and you should be A for a way. In terms of earthing, you've got your earth cable, which is over here, okay? That goes to the negative terminal. It actually goes down under the battery, bolts to the chassis, and you can run it along and you can run it to the block, which is exactly how the IS200 was wired originally with the 1G in. So again, you're just going to follow that principle along there. Normally, these cables are quite thin, so you can replace them if you want to. But again, I haven't run into issues per se with those cables. It's not usually a problem. But if someone has pulled an engine out and ripped the cable, yeah, there may be a problem. So it might be worth considering just checking that cable over before you put the engine in for the final time and bolt everything in. All right, and as I discussed over here, it is advisable to put another earth strap from the cylinder head to the firewall. If you look at your IS200, there was a little section over here with the brake vacuum line that came along there. That was where the 1G had an earth that went from there to the cylinder head. So just use that particular point and you should be A for a way, because that's a standard Toyota earthing point. So with the earth on the block from the battery and that earth and cylinder head, you should be absolutely fine and you shouldn't run into any issues for that. Okay, right, so now that is the entire layout. As you can see, I've just laid it all out. Not even the battery's connected. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pop off. I'm going to get the battery connected, carry out the testing, make sure it's all okay. We're going to pop back, we do the testing, and as I said, there's two sections, one with just the ignition on and one with the engine running. So stick around for that and you're going to hear the engine actually running and everything working as it should. So let me do that, be with you guys in a second. Right guys, so now we're back and we're going to be jumping into the testing of the engine and harness now. So as I said, it's broken up into two sections. One is going to be just the ignition on, carry out a couple of tests there. Second part is going to be with the engine running. So obviously we'll go through all the bits and bobs that we need to test with the engine running, make sure everything is working as we expect it to. Right, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all the tests. We'll jump into the ignition part and then we'll move on to the actual running part. So with the ignition on, because it's an IS200 plug and play, what we're going to be testing is the ambient temperature sensor. And what I mean by that is basically on the climate control there, you'll see an outside temperature. Now, in the case of the MPX analog device, it actually just constantly displays 18 degrees. It doesn't actually sense the ambient temperature. We just did that so you guys don't have the annoying E or the two dashes there. That is really annoying. Next up, we're going to be looking at the check engine lights. We want to see that pop up on the dash there. Then we're going to check the oil pressure. So again, we're going to pop down here and we're going to look at the oil pressure light. Just a side note on the MPX analog device, because the alternator light is transmitted via MPX, what the device will do is if the voltage drops below 11.8 volts, obviously the alternator light will pop on. We do test that, but obviously it's a little bit convoluted for when we do in the video. So you won't see the alternator light come on, but that's just to let you know that's how that works. Next up, we're going to test the AC relay. So all I'm going to do is go and press the AC button there, and we're going to listen for the AC relay to click in the corner over there to make sure that that is working as we expect it to. Then we're going to test the reverse. So I'm just going to go to our reverse plug here, bridge the wires, which is exactly what your gearbox does, and we should hear the annoying beep that you get on the IS200s when you put it into reverse. Next up is going to be the speedo. So we're going to feed a signal directly to the plug to make sure that all the wiring from the terminals all the way to the cluster is 100%, and we should see that speed signal come through. Once that's done, that's just the ignition part. Then we're going to move on to the actual engine running part. So then we're going to test the starter circuit. So what do I mean by that? We're going to obviously turn the key in the ignition to start position. Engine should crank over. Then I know that everything from the key to the actual ECU box there is all 100%, and that it makes its way all the way to the starter motor. Next up is the tacho. So we're going to be looking for the tacho signal to be popping through onto the cluster there. So again, just making sure that it actually works. We'll probably give a bit of a rev so you can see it go up and down. Then we're going to test injectors and coils, and what I mean by that is basically I'm going to unplug each injector one by one so you can actually hear it misfiring. Now, not sure if you guys know, but obviously the earlier generation ones, so the ones with the mass airflow sensor like this, the big aluminium one, they're actually semi-sequential injection. So you'll see there's only 4 outputs on the ECU. So technically 2 injectors are firing at the same time, okay? Obviously the newer ones, 95 to 97, they are semi-sequential. So they have 8 injector outputs on the ECU, and therefore each injector is only firing when it needs to be. All right, next up is coolant temp. So again, our little MPX device over there, or translator device, is taking the temperature sensor from the standard 1UZ non-VVTi single wire temp sensor there. It's then translating it to come up on the dash. Now that is adjustable, so I will put a link up in the top corner there for you guys. You can go watch a video on how to adjust that. Or with all our harnesses, I do adjust it, but please bearing in mind that I have got a different fan switch from what you would have in an IS200. So it may not be 100% accurate, but normally what I would do in the terms of adjustment is get it up to temperature, let the fans come on and off a couple of times so we know it's running at running temperature. Sorry, a bit of a cold there. And then what I'll do is I will adjust it then. Okay. Right, so next up after that, we're going to be looking at the codes. So obviously when the engine's running, we want to see the check engine light turn off. That's the most important part. So we know we've got no codes that are vital to the engine running. And what I'll do is I'm going to go and show you guys exactly how to do the codes themselves. Right, so that's pretty much it in terms of the testing. So I think it's time to jump into the ignition part. So let's do that now. So as it's plug and play, you can clearly see I'm just taking the key, I'm putting it straight into the ignition, and I'm turning it on. All right, once we do that, I'm going to pop around here and we're going to go over to the ambient temperature sensor. So as you can see over there, just move this i300 cluster out the way, we can see 18 degrees. It's going to continue to display that, but that just means you don't have the annoying E and the double dashes over there. Next up is check engine light. As you can clearly see, that is working in the corner there. Oil pressure, we can see our red oil pressure light. And actually, while I'm here, the low oil level light, that needs to be removed from your dash, as well as the TRC bulb. Otherwise, they're going to continue to flash. So, Zane, do remember to remove those when you are installing everything. Okay. Next up is the AC relay. So all I basically want to hear is I want to hear that relay click. So I'm just going to press the AC button. And you can hear there. Well, hopefully you can hear there, but that is the AC magnetic clutch relay, so that will then supply 12 volts to the AC clutch and activate your air conditioning. Right, next up is going to be reverse. So again, I've got my reverse plug right over here, and all I'm basically going to do is what your gearbox does, and I'm just going to bridge those together. And you'll see the moment that I bridge those together, you get that annoying beep to indicate that the reverse circuit is working 100%. So it is literally from the terminals of this connector all the way through inside the vehicle, not only to the cluster, but also to the reverse lights as well, that is working. Next up is going to be speedo, and if you watched any of our other videos, you'll know what this is. It just imitates a speed signal for me so that I can go from there. Furthermore, because this is a Hall effect style sensor, you'll actually see that what we're going to do now is we're actually going to use that to our advantage, and we're going to test the positive and the ground that is built into this plug here. Now, the positive comes from the actual fuse box selection, but the ground comes actually from the cluster itself to obviously avoid ground loops in terms of the speed signal, even though it's a Hall effect style sensor. Right, so all I'm going to do now is put this into test mode, and then what we'll do is we'll go and we'll plug it in, and then you will see that the speedo is working. So give me a second, it's a bit hard single-handedly. There you go, so you can see I've got my little flashing LED. That means my 12 volts and my grounds are working 100%. All I'm going to do is show you the cluster there, and as I bridge my output signal into the third wire, you can see we've got a speed signal over there. So I'm super happy with that. Disconnect that all, and I know that basically from the terminals of here all the way to the cluster, everything is 100%. Now, sorry, obviously we get a lot of guys questioning stuff when they are installing it. So here's a little tip for you guys. If you find that your speed is not working with the gearbox, now perfectly acceptable. Sometimes the gearboxes, when they get taken out, the speed sensor on the side gets bashed on something like that. Absolutely fine. Best thing that you can do is, obviously we've tested it out to make sure that the wiring from there to the cluster is okay. On your side, the easiest way to do it is literally take out the speed sensor, the gearbox, plug it in, take a drill and tape it to that, and then just spin it around and get your friend to jump in and see if that speed works. If you pull out the gearbox, strap a drill, spin it, and speed works, then clearly there's something wrong with the actual sensor going into the gearbox, and something is not turning that sensor. If you spin it and you get no signal whatsoever, more than likely just your speed sensor is actually faulty. And then obviously see, hopefully, maybe you've got a friend with one lying around, you can just plug it in and test it out before you go and replace that. But that's a nice easy test for you guys to do if that is not functioning when it arrives with you at your vehicle. Okay, so that is obviously the testing side with the ignition on. As you can see, I've clearly warmed it up because I've got coolant temperature sensor already there. So in actual fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump straight into the testing portion with the actual engine running now. So again, I'm just going to quickly recap for you. We're going to be doing starter circuit, so making sure it turns on the key and the engine turns over. We'll come back to the cluster and we'll look at the tacho signal, make sure we've got that. While we're here, we'll also make sure that the check engine light goes off and the oil light goes off, so we know those are working as they should do. Then we're going to pop in and we're going to take off each injector one by one, just so we can hear the engine misfiring when we do that. And then coolant temp, well, you've already pretty much seen it there, so that's already done. And then what we'll do is we'll go through the diagnostic codes, how to read them. And obviously in these harnesses, we do give a welcome pack with all the diagnostic codes on so that you can do it from there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my ear defenders on because it's very loud. It's just manifolds on here. And what we'll do is jump into the starting of the engine. So let me do that now quickly. Rightio, so I'm all good to go. So as I said, plug and play, we're just going to crank the key and the engine's going to fire over. So I'll just move across here. There you go. Right, so starter circuit, A-OK. Tacho signal we got coming through there. And there you go. Right, so now we're going to look at injectors and coils. I'm going to go around here so we can end up back over there again. So I've got injector 1. I've got injector 3, injector 5, injector 7. Rightio, let's pop over here now. We've got injector 2 over here. Injector 4 is underneath there. Injector 6 is underneath there. And injector 8 is over there. Fantastic, so those are all working, and we've got coolant temp already displaying on the dash over there, so we're super happy with that. Okay, right, so also you can see check engine light's gone out and oil light has gone out, so again super happy with that. So for now I'm just going to turn it off, just going to turn it back on again and take off my ear defenders so I don't need to be so loud. Right, so diagnostic codes. Okay, number 1, we're using the check engine light system. So in other words, all we're doing is bridging some terminals. It's then going to flash us the engine codes via the check engine light, and that is how we're going to be reading the codes. Right, so for starters, depending on the year of your IS200 is going to depend whether you have 2 means of doing this or just 1. So if your vehicle's after 2001, you're only going to have the OBD2 port, which is that one over there. Now in your case, obviously going to be tucked away underneath there, plugged into the plastics of your underneath your dash. If your vehicle is 98 to 2000 or 2001, what you're going to notice is you've got this little diagnostics port in front of the fuse box here. Okay, now if you have this, you can actually bridge the terminals there, which is what we're going to do today, and therefore we're going to be able to read the diagnostic codes. If you don't have that, you're going to bridge pin 4 and 13 or 5 and 13. Basically 13 is TC for trouble codes, 4 and 5 are both ground, so effectively you're grounding it out. You can do this with a paper clip, you can do it with a wire, you can do it with your girlfriend's hair clips or whatever. You probably got loads of those lying in the car. So basically that's all you're basically going to need for that. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flick this around. Let's move that out of the way because we need to see the check engine light as we do this. Okay, so I've told you how to do it with the OBD2 machine, so that's really straightforward. You're just going to bridge those 2 pins. If you have this little diagnostic box in the front here, what you're looking for, if you look inside here, is basically TC, which is that one over there. Hopefully you can see like where my nail is. And then E1, which is that one in the top corner there. Okay, so again, E1 is really straightforward. That is literally just a ground. So instead of your 4 or 5, which is in your OBD2 port, that's going to be that one over there. So let me just get this nice and straight. Right, so as we do that, you're going to see that the check engine light is going to go off. So I'm just going to pop over to the check engine light there. You see that goes off. Now, unfortunately, you can see that there is actually no codes. So basically, that's what it does when there's no codes at all. So you're just going to get a consistent flash like that. Right? Bad example for you guys. I do have a video about diagnostics, so you see it in the top corner there. I'll probably put a link to it. I know it's on one of our harnesses of the fuse box, but exactly the same principles apply. You just don't have to worry about having permanent 12-volt supply because technically that's all taken care of for you in there. Right, so how does it work? Basically, it's like Morse code. So effectively, if you had a problem with your mass airflow sensor, you'd get a code 24 or 31. Now 24 is intake air temperature and 31 is actually mass airflow. How would it display that? It would basically flash twice. So we go 1, 2, pause, 1, 2, 3, 4, pause. Then it would go 1, 2, 3, pause. Then it would go 1. And then you'd have a long pause because that means it's the end of the codes. And then it would go back and then it would go 2, 4, 3, 1. Go back again, 2, 4, 3, 1. Okay. So basically that is how you read the codes. It'll give you codes for pretty much everything is on there. Now again, the way we've wired this all up, obviously everything is working. We've actually got no codes on here at all. So again, I'll put that link up, or I'll put it up earlier about the 1UZ diagnostic so you guys can see exactly that. And again, we will provide with the entire diagnostic sheet, okay? One little thing is obviously the diagnostics are very good. It's always the first port of call when you are wanting to diagnose an issue with your car. First thing is obviously check engine light coming up. Check engine light comes up, clearly something is wrong, so you need to start looking at what exactly that is. Now then, the diagnostics might not always point you to the actual problem, but it might give you a hint as to what the problem might be. What I mean by that is you can have weird codes and actually the fault that's causing it is almost not related to that sensor at all. I know it sounds really weird, just the way it works. And obviously this is where you would need some expertise to help you out with that, which there are plenty of on the internet. And obviously we can help you out as well if you come across something that we've come across before in the past, okay? Now there is a second part to this, and it is very important for you to know. When you do bridge those 2 wires, what you are doing is putting the engine into a diagnostic mode. Now, that obviously gives you the codes. That's great. Second thing it does is it locks the timing at 10 degrees. So if you have a look down here, you've got 0, 5, 10, and 15. You've also got a mark on the crank pulley there. So what you can actually do is remove this cover, find cylinder 1 HT lead, strap a timing light to it, start the engine with those pins bridged either in the OBD2 port or there. And what it'll do is it'll lock the timing at 10 degrees. And effectively then what you're going to do is look and make sure that your timing is correct. Now obviously these very early engines are non-interference engines, so you can quite happily mix up the timing and not have any major mechanical failures. So it is useful to know that you can check the timing based on what it should be, okay? So these are non-adjustable distributors. You cannot adjust them. You need to make sure that your cam positioning and your crank positioning is correct. And obviously you can check it with the timing light before you go and start pulling everything down and triple checking. And you can see if you're a couple of degrees out or whatever from there. Now the reason I mention that is because if you decide, I'll just leave it in there, it doesn't bother me. Well, what it's going to do is it's going to lock the timing at 10 degrees and you are going to have no power. So please bear that in mind. Do not leave it in place. It is only meant for diagnostics and must be removed the moment you are finished doing the diagnostics. Okay. Right, so you guys stick around. We've got some nice photos of the harness complete, but obviously we've got to get this boxed up now and off to Australia so he can get his car running. That's Zane. And then what we'll do is if you guys have any comments or suggestions, again, feel free to put them down below. You can also find us on Facebook at Phoenix Engine Management, and you can send us a message there if you have any queries at all. But again, guys, thanks for watching. Zane, let's get this off so you can get your car running. And to everybody else, we will see you again soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.